All right, you guys, today I have a special guest, one of my friends, Kaylor Betts. He is the king of self-worth. I have dubbed you this nickname. And it is because of your ability to talk about how we're showing up in our life and how it is that self-worth and self-esteem and mental health are really at the root of everything we're thinking, everything we're feeling, every actions that we're taking, how we're showing up in our careers, how we're showing up in our love life. And as you and I have gotten to know each other better, the more that we've kind of talked about dating and relationships um, and just our own self-worth and how sometimes we choose the wrong people because of that, I thought it would be so appropriate to have you on and have a conversation about why is it that we choose the wrong people and how do we really you've shared something privately with me in a group that you had come on and done about kind of some steps towards self-worth and how do you actually learn to love yourself. So I'd love to cover that today, but welcome. So pumped to have you on the podcast.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Katie. Can we just acknowledge we just took a few deep breaths and I just feel like leaps and bounds better than I did before. So the power of breath work, it's incredible.
It's so true. So you guys, right before Kaylor and I started hitting record, we were like going a mile an hour. Like he was coming in hot from somewhere, I was coming in. He was like, "Do you mind if we take like 3 deep breaths before we start?" I was like, "No, that would be awesome." But it
Yeah.
is true.
Yeah.
Breath. I'm a breath holder.
A breath
I
holder.
Yeah, like I tend to hold my breath when I'm working,
Oh,
not
I
when I'm
see.
coaching,
Yeah.
but like when I'm punching out on emails and
Yeah. Do
driving
you,
in the car.
what about are you a nose breather? Are you a mouth breather? Do you know that?
I'm definitely a nose breather,
Yeah. Okay.
even when I sleep. Are
But
you a
you're,
nose breather or
yeah,
open mouth?
but you're supposed to be a nose breather. That's actually better.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's better for the I think the sympathetic nervous system. It's better to get, I mean, I could try and go into the science, but I'm a layman when it comes to that, so I won't even try. But yeah, it's I think it's superior to breathing through your nose for sure, or sorry, breathing through your mouth for sure.
It's so interesting how when you do hold your breath and like how you're kind of, I mean, we breathe naturally on our own, right? But like I often find that every week or every other week, I always get into sympathetic nervous system, like where I'm in fight or flight. And
Yeah.
I'm at my body is so hardwired to be in it that I don't actually know when I'm in it. It's only when I go to the doctors every 2 weeks that she clicks me back on and then I'm good to go.
So
But I've
cool
been,
thing.
yeah,
Sorry to interrupt, Katie,
no.
but who did I learn this from? I can't remember his name. Andrew Huberman. I don't know if you've heard of him.
Mm-mm.
But he talks about how if we have the parasympathetic nervous system, which is like calm and rest and relax, and then we
Mm.
have the sympathetic nervous system, which is the focus and it can be fight or flight as well too. But when we exhale, our sympathetic nervous system gets activated. So he says one of the quickest ways in which we can just relax in any situation is to take 2 quick breaths in through the nose. So it actually goes like this. And then out through the mouth and exhale and make it way longer than the inhale. So it's like, and he says and he's a very credible person. So he
Mm.
says that's the fastest way to activate that, calm, cool, and collective part of our nervous system. So just
That
something.
is incredible. I mean, I feel calmer even just in us doing it. And there's
Mhm.
something in the power of breathing together that, like, as you were doing
Yeah.
it, I felt more calm. But I was thinking about that. Like, sometimes we get into this groove of when we're so in our heads, and particularly on the topic of like dating or taking time off to focus on yourself, like we focus on here, is like, I can't tell you how many times I'd be like swiping on a dating app and really not consciously aware of like my breath and how I was feeling and kind of feeling in fight or flight mode or just kind of high from the whole like dating process. And I think so much of my journey has definitely been, and I try to do this throughout the day, even at work, but I worked in corporate America and like you didn't have time to breathe. You had time to get shit done. So I've
Yes.
definitely tried to reprogram myself and start to breathe actively, like during the day.
And let's just acknowledge too, like you just mentioned, swiping through the dating apps. I mean, look, we're here to talk about dating and love and relationships. Like one thing I've found to be incredibly useful and really serves us in dating and in love is to do it consciously And really what that means, so people know, is it's to do it in the moment, to be aware of what you're actually doing, and to have intention behind it. So let's even just talk about the dating apps. Like there's two types of swiping. There's swiping to get to an end and to be very attached to an outcome. And typically that's like, I need to swipe as fast as I can. So I have, and it comes from a scarcity mindset. It comes from lack. It comes from not being enough and not having enough love. I need to swipe as fast as possible so I can find the person that then validates me to then feel adequate and feel enough, instead of, the other contrast, which would be just consciously being very present with the app and just actually taking in like every photo you look. I mean, if you're a woman listening right now and you're looking at males, well, really look at like, what's this guy's environment, like what's his facial expressions telling me, what's his body language telling me. Oh my god, look at the beautiful tree in the background. Like, it sounds so crazy, but it's like, it's game changing, right? To actually just be in the moment. And it's not just with dating, it translates in every area of our life. But I find it incredibly useful in the dating world for sure.
It's so true because I think back to those times where I had a different energy when it came to dating. When I went on the dating apps, I was super resistant to it at first. But somebody had shared with me, they're like, it's kind of like LinkedIn. I mean, if you're looking for a job, that would be the place you go. So why not go to an app? And I remember hearing the energy of other people around me who were using the app saying, oh my gosh, these people are ghosting me, or I hate online dating, or I'm too old for this shit, like whatever the thoughts were, right? And then now understanding what I do is like the thoughts were creating these feelings that they felt hopeless or frustrated or whatever the case may be, which has you swiping from a lonely place, or has you unconsciously swiping, and so much time has gone by. And I remember a client asked me today, she said, well, she's going in from like one phase to the next, starting to date. And she's like, well, how much time should I spend? Like an hour? And I was like, oh, no, 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 no. I was like, who has an hour to swipe on a dating app? I was like, my suggestion would be more like 10 minutes, where like 10 minutes you're swiping, and then the next day you're replying to messages. And because to your point, I kind of treat the dating apps as if they're like photo hunt game. Like I swipe because you're hot, right? I swipe because you're hot. And then I'm going back in through and consciously looking at the pictures, like you said, of like, oh, they hike, or oh, they fish. Oh, I don't fish. Like I should probably bring that up. Or they have a dog and I'm allergic to dogs, like whatever it is,
Yeah.
to figure out like what would be the best questions to ask them to see if we have good vibes or good energy, and do we want to like take it to a phone call, you know?
Well, and this is why I like, you said something to me that's always stood out and I'll always remember, is you said just like, a really useful exercise in dating is to approach everyone that you're seeing as like you're just building a friendship at first, right? And I think it's really our attachment to the outcome and what you've just were describing in terms of like people getting caught up in the like, oh, I hate the dating apps. They're people get stressed out because they're so attached to the outcome, and they're so perfectionistic in their approach. Like everything needs to go in the way, that quote that we always see on the internet that's like the bullshit picture, and the thing that screws you up the most is the bullshit picture in your head of the way things are supposed to be, right? So we go on these dating apps and we have such an attachment to an outcome. We have such a bullshit picture in our head of like, this is how it's supposed to go. And it's like, how about just like submitting to the process and enjoying each moment and like approaching it like, look, this is just going to be, it's funny for me when I go on the dating apps, a lot of people ask me like right away, so like, what are you looking for? Like, what do you want? And I think that can be a very useful question, but sometimes I feel it's coming on so heavy that it's like, whoa, I think you're like way too attached to like, how this outcome needs to be. When my answer to that is always like, well, um, I don't know. We'll see what this might come. I mean, this might just be a friendship. I've literally met girls on the dating app that I'm friends with to this day.
Mhm.
I've met girls on the dating apps who have actually become clients. Like it's very rare, and that's certainly, I don't want to get the idea that people think that that's why I'm on there, but that's happened. I've had girls make me pieces of art because they're artists and I love their art
Yeah.
that they're doing, and they end up making me a mental health piece. Like, and then some girls I go on a few dates with and it doesn't work out, and then it's cool, but and then hopefully one day I'll meet the love of my life. But I think it's so useful Not that we can't have intentions of where this is going to go, and not that we can't ask the person, like, what are your intentions? I think that's something that serves us, but we have to be really careful to not be too attached to, like, I need this to work out in the way that I have in my head, because it puts this added pressure and burden that, and it also would make me question, like, what are you using these dating apps for?
Yeah, that's really well said. I think one of the things that I find is really common, specifically with women, is that they have a hard time using their voice. And when they do, it often comes across crazy or needy. At least this is what they're saying in their head. And part of that is the explanation that you just gave of like that sort of, I call it the coming in hot. Like, I liked what you said though. It's like really because in our heads, we have an attachment to what this conversation would be, or the future of what it will be in the future or whatever. And but I have always suggested that, like, go back and forth a little bit on text message and within the app. And if you're vibing within like 5 or 6 messages and you're firing things off back and forth, it's like, why not just move to a phone call? And even if it's 15 minutes, to be able to ask their intentions on the call. Again, it doesn't need to be the intention of like, what does the intention of this relationship? Well, one of the questions that I think I've shared with you that Matt asked me is like, all right, so if we are going to get to know each other, like, what do you need in order to do that? Like, how often do you want to spend time together? How often do you want to text versus call? And I think so many people base their self-worth on whether somebody texts every day. That's a common one I hear, is like, well, if I don't hear from them every day, then I don't think that they like me. Or conversations start off really strong and then they drop off. And this builds frustration because their expectation is either, if you need to drop off, you'll give me a heads up, or you just don't like me anymore, or you're dating somebody else. And we're attaching the outcome of somebody else's actions to ourselves, to our own self-worth, when really simply the question that I think needs to be had, and I'd love your thoughts on this, is like, how do you want to communicate when we first get to know each other? What would be the best outcome for the both of us, so that I can be respectful of your time and you can be respectful of my time, and we both feel seen, heard, and understood.
Well, I agree with all that. I think that it's actually a big problem, and I think, quite honestly, Katie, that most people are using dating as a tool or a vessel to really give them evidence on, I'm going to go back to it, on whether they feel, whether they're worthy of love, care, and attention, right? Rather than actually using dating for what it's supposed to be used for, which is just finding someone that allows you to be your truest, authentic self, supports you in your growth and all of the passions that you have, and is this beautiful added experience on top of it all. I mean, that's really what it's supposed to be, right? But yet, I see this all the time, and it comes with no shame and judgment, because I've been there as well too,
Mm.
and we do it all unconsciously. And I really believe that if some people were to hear what I just said, or and what you've been saying as well too, they would it would hit them like a brick wall. Like, oh my God, I've been using dating for that. I actually, and it's funny, like, I've posted videos and I talk about how, like, I used to walk into a room and wonder if everyone liked me. And I've worked very hard on getting to a point where now I walk into a room and I'm not, worried as much if they like me or not. I'm thinking, do I like them? I'm qualifying them. And it's the same thing showing up on a date or opening up a conversation on Bumble or Hinge. And it's about opening that conversation and actually asking yourself and making it a priority of wondering whether you like them, not what do I need to do so that they can love me and give me care and attention so that I then can feel adequate.
I like that you mentioned that you've practiced that and that you've like worked hard at that. That is, I think that's a common misconception, is that I hear the word normal used a lot. Like people will say, well, if I was normal, then I would do X, Y, and Z. And it's like, no, I think we all do this, right? And I think we're unconsciously doing it because subconsciously, like, we have been programmed by our environment by even just chemistry of how we were born, the environment in which we were raised in. Like there's so many factors. But can you describe to myself and the audience, like, so how did you practice? How did you practice being able to walk into a room or date from a place of, rather than me wanting to be chosen by them or liked by them, I now consciously work at, doesn't mean you do it perfectly, neither do I, but I catch myself, it feels really sticky when I still do it. I'm like, oh, that was some old shit. Like, how do
Yeah.
you practice really choosing whether or not you like them? Oh, we just lost Kaylor. Let's wait for him to come back. Good question, though, right? For those of you who are on Facebook, you're welcome to ask questions too. I think I can see them from here. But I think Kaylor hit the exit button and he's now swearing to himself. Let's see. I'm going to actually look and see if there's any questions that are coming in on Facebook. Well, anyway, I will kill some airtime here until Kaylor gets back. But what I can share with you, what I have personally done is, and I'm just going to look at our text message to make sure he's not having trouble. Okay. What I have done to practice learning how to love myself and learning how to choose whether I like someone is, one, I got into a 12-step group program that was free. There was no cost. And I started surrounding myself with men and women and people of all ages. Oh, here comes Kaylor. Hi. It's okay.
I don't know what happened.
It's all right. This is
Hey,
divine intervention.
we're still here.
I was killing airtime. I was telling them what
Keep
I've
them
done.
company. Okay.
I was doing a dance. I was like putting a
And
circus act on. No.
as I went back into the link, I'm like thinking of my answer. So can we just go right into my
Yeah, go
answer?
right
Okay.
into it. I'm not going to edit
Well,
it.
I think that we have to do these low risk experiments. So what I mean by that is we have to take little baby steps and we need to enter into the unknown, right? And what I mean by low risk experiments is the way our psychology works is if you disrupt the pattern that you've been living in for too long, because our psychology is only, concerned with our survival, it actually thinks if you interrupt that pattern for too long or disrupt it in too many ways, it actually thinks it's like life or death. It thinks it's a threat to your survival. So we have to take these little low risk experiments and we just got to get out of our comfort zone just a little bit each time. So it could be this little thing like, like maybe for the first time, not agreeing with someone on a dating app when you first are getting to that, and just say, hey, you know what, I actually think differently in that regard, but that's all good. Or it might be saying no to even, you can do it outside of dating. It could be, you could say no to a friend that wants to go for coffee but you really don't have the energy or space for, like it's prioritizing your needs over other people's wants, and it's looking for those little low risk experiments. And the more you do that, the more confident you get. And every single time you stand up for yourself and you choose you and you prioritize yourself over everyone else's needs, or sorry, over everyone else's wants, it's like a little case study that you get back that
Mm.
tells your psychology that, like, oh shit, the sun did come up the next day and everything's fine. And I actually like rocked that. And I actually like, I'm okay.
Right.
Every time we do that, it's this little case study that gives us more confidence. And that's how I did it, Katie. I interrupted the pattern with these little low risk experiments. I started small, but I finally started prioritizing me. And sometimes it's just, look, we have to change the pattern in the same way we developed it. We developed it from our environment and our experiences growing up and everything we viewed out there. So we just got to change the environment and the experience. And the only way we can do that as an adult is we just got to make different decisions and make different actions and tell ourselves different things. So
Mm.
just to be as practical as possible, it's like just slowly but surely start doing things that you've never done and you'll get to a place you've never been, is the Coles notes.
Yeah, that makes sense. It kind of reminds me of something that you said when you came and talked and Let Love In. You said the question was, how do I learn to love myself? And you gave such a great example. You're like, it's kind of like dating. you said that you do two things. You say nice things to if you're dating somebody, you would say nice things to them to earn their trust, and that you would also keep promises. So if your date's at 5, you're going to show up at 5. You're not going to show up at 6 because that would break trust. And we do the same things within ourselves to learn how to love ourselves and trust. And I can't tell you, not only have I repeated that, I think like 10 million times on social media, but also within the Let Love In group, everybody just keeps saying that almost every week. Like the small promise I kept to myself this week was I made my bed, or like I decided that I was going to get on the dating app and actually put more of a description detail of what I truly want in a relationship. So if I don't want a guy that does drugs, okay, cool, I'm going to put that down. If I don't want to date a woman who lives more than 90 minutes away from me, I'm going to put that down. And like really get crystal clear on that. And then that way they can reduce essentially half the population, Kaylor, because,
Yeah.
right,
And,
you're
and at the very least, Katie, even I love that theory, but at least, and this is a place you can start if you're kind of, you don't know where to start, or if you think you're starting from behind, at the very least, just don't say anything bad or catch yourself when you're saying something very negative, or at least, it might not be doing a bunch of really nice loving things for yourself. Maybe you're not quite there yet and you're in a really rough place, but at least don't do anything that is harming, right? Like
well said.
that might be the best place to start, and then you can work on, because I think that before we love ourselves, we have to accept ourselves, and we do have to show up for ourselves through action. And if you say you're going to do laundry on Sunday night because you have no clean underwear left, and instead you choose to just eat ice cream and watch Netflix, and in your head that you're already shaming yourself for doing that, well, that's not serving your future self. That's
Mm.
not something that you would do to show up for someone you are falling in love with. So why do we think we can let ourselves down like that and have any kind of love for or even acceptance of ourselves?
It's so true. I think so many people that I know who suffer from love addiction. I mean, you're ultimately describing love addiction at its core, which is like I truly want to be loved by someone, and so I am doing all of these things. I'm fulfilling all these promises for them that will make them feel good. But after you do it, be it sleep with them, be it text them, whatever, stop, don't go to your workout so you can go to dinner with them. Eventually, what ends up happening is you truly start to lose yourself. And when you just said that in order to love yourself, you have to accept yourself, a big part of my journey, like if I were to answer that question back about the things that I've practiced, it was like, first things first, I had to admit that I needed help. Like I had no idea that the problem was that I needed to love and accept myself. I thought the problem was that I couldn't meet the right guy and that my picker was off. But as I went and got, so I knew right away that I needed help, but I had no idea where to start. So then, of course, I went the typical route of like trying to go to therapy or something, and that particularly didn't work for me. But then I got into a 12-step program, SLAA, that really focuses on this topic of love addiction. And what they started to teach us, and again, it's like they being all these people, it would be like you and me in a room, and we don't even know each other's last name, right? Is that they started to build this concept of if you put these behaviors down, the eating ice cream and the watching Netflix and like going to that person's house that you're super attracted to, because if you sleep with them, it's going to make you feel like shit the next day. If you can start to put those behaviors down and not reach for the phone every time you're lonely and trying to fill void with an ex or whatever the case may be, then you will start to keep these small promises to yourself. But you also have to promise that you won't do them to one other person within the group. And that gives you the ability to trust and rely on someone else. And then that one person becomes like 2 to 5 within the group. And you start reaching out to them more consistently and using your voice. It's essentially what we've all doing with coaching too. I mean, that's what's so powerful about your program is being able to be in an immersive container with people who can share their daily thoughts about the wins or the things they're not doing well or the things that they want to reduce the shame of. But kind of what I was thinking as you were talking about that is like part of acceptance is removing the shame of the things that we've done in the past that haven't built our self-worth, right?
Yeah. And I think that, yeah, shame is a massive component to this. Um, and I think that, often it's our triggers that give us evidence of where our shame lies, So what if you look in a relationship, like what comes up for you that bothers you? When does your heart beat faster? When do you get a little bit pissed off or moody, or what do you not like? I mean, those often are, entryways to finding out where we actually have the most shame within ourselves. And I think that there's some things that we can do with shame, like we can bring it from the subconscious to the conscious, and when it's brought into the conscious, that's when it's malleable. That's when we can like play with it a little bit, maybe for lack of a better term. We can change the narrative and we can reframe it. We can tell ourselves a different story, and that goes into more like the psychotherapy aspect. But one thing that I believe can really fight shame, and fight's probably a horrible word for it, but to overcome or manage shame is to to act in a way in which makes you feel the opposite of shame, right? Makes you feel very proud of yourself. And I really truly believe, Katie, that after a while, if you show up for yourself enough, if you work on enough acceptance, if you keep those little promises to yourself, if you act like you love yourself, sooner or later you will get so much evidence. Your environment and your experiences will be so different that you will not even be able to help it other than to just feel very proud of yourself and look at yourself in a much higher regard. And
Mhm.
that shame will just be overtaken by the amount of pride and the amount of love and um, acceptance that you have of yourself. And that's been my experience. And I've also seen it, in my clients going through their journeys as well too.
So well said. I was thinking of an example that I think many of us have probably had, which is, being in a relationship with someone where there's a bit of a toxic pull, right? There's something that there's a payoff that we're getting from spending time with them, even though we know deep down it doesn't feel good. And this isn't my energy now, but it definitely had been in the past. And so I have a client who literally was heading home for the first time in a while. And she knew that every time she goes home, her pull is to call her ex back
Mm.
and to go sleep with him and like hang out, whatever else. And we were on the phone. She was about to get in the car. And I said, what if just this one time you go home and you decide that you're not going to call him and you're not going to sleep with him? And she's like, I know, but he lives at the top of my street. I have to drive by the house. I go, I know, but what if this one time, instead of like you were talking about the subconscious and the conscious of like, your brain is firing this neuron that says every time you go home you do this, every time you go home you do this. So what if you break it and you say, just this one time, maybe the next time I will go sleep with him, but just for this one time I won't. And you then drive home on your 3 hour drive on Monday, and you feel this sense of accomplishment. And I asked her to pretend as if she was driving home and how she would feel. And what was the one action step that she would take? The one action step she would take is she would text me whenever she felt the urge. And then two, she would text me on the way home and say, oh my God, I crushed that. So she goes out to dinner with her mom, and who does she see?
No,
The ex.
come on.
And she's like, Katie, even though I was sweating and like my head was down, and I was like, my mom was like, what's wrong with you? And she was like, I just need to get out of this restaurant. She's like, something in me that day, she's like, be it God, universe, whatever, broke. And she's like, and we were walking the beach last week, and she goes, and what happened was I was actually able to break the cycle. So when I go home, which I'm going home this weekend, I don't feel the need to call him or sleep with him. And she was like, it's so fucking incredible, Kaylor. Like,
I love
this
that
shit
story.
works.
I love that story. And we have to realize every single time we do something that we've never done, we get closer to a place that we've never been. And it really is just about recognizing in that moment that you're in such this conditioning and this pattern that, like you said, that neuron is firing and it's just like telling you what you should do. And it's useful to remember that our psychology wants us to do that because it's comfortable, it's familiar, and it just thinks it's what you need something to do for survival. Like, what better way to survive than to just continue doing what we've always done to bring us to survival today? That's how your psychology thinks. So, when you can, in that moment, when your psychology is telling you to do something that you know isn't going to serve your greatest good, it's not going to serve your future self. If you can, in that moment, just remind yourself that you are safe, that's what I would tell her is like, remind yourself that you are safe. One of my favorite mantras or affirmations, say what you want about them, but I think they have their place, is to just say that I'm safe. I don't
Mm,
need to do this. I'm safe. I'm okay. It's going to be okay to go home, not sleep with my ex, and or whatever the situation is.
mm,
And then remind yourself that every single time you do that, you're one step closer to changing the conditioning that is no longer serving you.
that is so powerful.
Yeah.
So, so powerful. Whew. All right. I think with that being said, I feel like we got a lot out of a little time. I'm
Yeah, yeah.
so grateful, Kaylor, that we have this friendship and that we are able to talk on such a deep level about self-worth because it really is the root of, I think, what so many of us are facing and feeling unfulfilled. And I'm just so grateful for the work that you're doing and that you're sharing your time with us too here in our community because I think the more that we can talk about mental health, the anxiety, the depression, and have conversations with our employees or employers or whatever in the lovers, whatever it may be. I'm just so grateful that you came on to talk today.
Yeah, thanks, Katie. I'm grateful for you too. And I love doing these. I mean, I love talking about this stuff. And I mean, I wouldn't have it any other way, so I appreciate you as well too.
You guys, if Kaylor, if they want to get in touch with you around coaching, around your podcast, things like that, can you share where they can get in touch?
Yeah. So, I mean, the best place to talk to me if you want to chat, my door is always open, is hit me up in the DMs on Instagram. So Kaylor.Betts. That's Taylor with a K and then .Betts, Betts. And then, yeah, like check out the podcast. The podcast, I mean, if you resonated with this conversation, you'll love the podcast. It's the Mental Wealth Podcast, and you can find it pretty much wherever you find podcasts: Google Play, Spotify, Apple, all that. And then I would just say, I like to kind of give a call to action. Like, number one, reach out to me, and I would love to jam on these topics and go even deeper because we could talk all day about these. But yeah, just interrupt the pattern and make it low risk, which is another way of saying just take a baby step. Do something different today that is going to serve your greatest good. And if you just compile a bunch of those together, they'll start compounding. And boy, oh boy, will your life change.
Incredible. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Katie.